Today is Saturday, May 18th. Did you know studies show more people than ever before are getting professional treatment for their mental health? And when Americans are asked to rate how good their mental health is, the scores are at all-time lows. We can see examples in real life all the time. Like when Sesame Street's Elmo asked on social media recently, "How is everybody doing?" It went viral with thousands of people responding and sharing their worries and stressors. Our guest expert today will give her theory on what's happening and what about today's society may be leading to a mental health crisis. Today, during Mental Health Awareness Month, I'm joined by licensed therapist Emma McAdam. You may know her from her YouTube channel, Therapy in a Nutshell, where she teaches mental health skills to more than 1.7 million subscribers. Emma McAdam and I discuss why Elmo's message had such a resonating effect, along with how to handle anxiety, burnout, social media, and more. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Emma McAdam, thank you so much for joining us here on the Newsworthy.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, over the last couple of years, we've seen multiple reports coming out about a mental health crisis in the U.S., especially among young people. Based on, your experience, your perspective as a therapist, how would you summarize mental health in the U.S. right now? And do you think there is a crisis?
Of course there's a crisis. More people are experiencing disordered anxiety than ever. But the interesting thing is, the more that we talk about it, it's not like we're actually being as helpful as we would like to be, because in some ways we're telling people that anxiety itself is dangerous, and the feeling of anxiety isn't dangerous, but more people are experiencing it and not knowing what to do with it than ever before, and that's causing big problems.
So we need to not just talk about anxiety, but talk about the solutions, or that it's okay to feel that way.
I think it's really important to talk about what function anxiety serves. So let's just imagine a scenario from in the past. The types of news we would have heard about would be, your neighbor runs over, bangs on your door and says, "Hey, my house is on fire." And you would have an anxiety response. Your cortisol would start pumping. Your muscles would get a ton of blood flow to them. So basically, you're primed for action, physical action. And that anxiety is super helpful because you're going to run over to your neighbor's house. You're going to help them with what they need. And then when, the fire's out or the house is burned down, that anxiety response naturally subsides. So anxiety is supposed to help us take action in a face-to-face, practical way to solve problems. And what we're seeing now is we're constantly exposed to perceived danger. So we watch the news about things happening very far from us. We have that same physical reaction in our bodies that's supposed to help us take action. But it's very hard to take action about what's going on in Ukraine, or what's going on in US politics, or what's going on, in Gaza. And so then that anxiety response gets kind of trapped in our body.
Even beyond some of the news aspects of it, what role do you think social media plays in some of this anxiety or mental health issues that we are seeing today?
On the one hand, the content of social media can be stress-provoking. But the other aspect of it is, when we want a break, when we want to relax, instead of doing something that takes effort, like visiting with a friend or going for a walk or resting out in the sunshine, the first thing, the most convenient thing to do is to look at our phones. So I think there's two problems here. One is the content on there is stressful and stress-inducing. And then the second one is when we avoid our problems with something that's not active or connecting with other human beings, that actually tells our brain this anxiety is dangerous. When we avoid anxiety, it tells our brain to make more anxiety.
I can just share a little bit of a personal update, related to that, where I have been taking a break from Instagram, which was my main social media platform for both business and personal life. I have been taking a break from that, and it took a few days to not automatically look at my phone when I wanted a break. But once I started walking downstairs, taking a step outside, doing something else, I am telling you, it has made a big difference in both my ability to kind of take breaks while I'm working, as well as not be so distracted all the time. And I feel like I've been able to get that under control a little bit better, just taking a break from Instagram. So I personally I'm not saying social media is all bad, but I have felt that difference of exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the anxiety epidemic, we could say, oh my gosh, everything is awful, everything's terrible. And the truth is, our world is actually safer than it ever has been. We live longer, there's less like famine, even though there are horrible things going on. But we feel like the world is worse than it's ever been. And that's partly because of our media consumption. But now's our chance to take a very proactive role in how we manage our media consumption, including social media. Personally, I'm a social media influencer technically. My main job is YouTube, and I've deleted Instagram off my phone. I have no work emails on my phone. I don't have my YouTube studio on my phone. I don't have Twitter on my phone. And I think we have to take a more proactive stance, and we can see this as a learning opportunity. Okay, the world has changed. Now let's learn how to manage it really well and turn our smartphones into dumb phones a little bit. We can actually get really healthy as we do this transformation. I don't think we need to think of this as like, oh, it's going to be terrible forever. We just see this as a learning opportunity and a chance to adapt and grow because we can't just keep doing what we've been doing.
Yes. And to add to that, I do still check messages for the newsworthy on Instagram through my browser. It's just not as convenient. And so I don't do it as often. And that's helpful.
Yep, and I check my work email on my computer. So I have to go into my office, sit down on my computer, and open up that browser instead of just reflexively doing it when you're sitting on the toilet, when you have a pause at the store, when you have whatever, right? So I think just being more intentional about our phone usage and those automatic habits can be really helpful in creating some space for our brain to process the stress and anxiety that we have. Because we have a natural ability to feel anxious. We also have a natural ability to resolve that anxiety. And when we're constantly distracting ourselves, we don't give our brain a chance to just kind of file those things away and solve those problems that we have mentally.
And I imagine that this is all contributing to something else I've heard a lot about, which is burnout. Have you heard a lot about burnout? You know, there's been some reports that say we're more burned out than ever before.
I think burnout's a real problem. And last year, I was really struggling with burnout. The problem isn't stress. The problem is chronic stress. So not taking breaks from that. And so again, our phones are in our pockets. We look at our work emails all the time. More of us are working from home or more of us are working part virtually. And so we don't have those positive interactions. We don't have the laughing and the fun that we used to have with other people. And because we've cut out a lot of the joyful parts of our work, all we experience is, the work parts of our work. And that can be really burnout inducing as well. So
advice for trying to incorporate more of that, or how do you handle burnout? How did you handle burnout last year?
I work from home. I'm a YouTuber in addition to being a therapist. And I wanted to make sure to include more people. So I started collaborating with more editors and planning in time that isn't efficient at all. I'm a really efficient person, so I like to work. And sitting around having meetings is like, oh, not the most efficient use of time. But including people in my life actually helps me be happier and more productive. So we have more meetings, but we try to make them fun. One thing with burnout is it's like you have a backpack and you put your stress from your work into your backpack. It's like rocks you're putting into your backpack. At the end of the day, you don't take those rocks out. And then you go to work the next day and you add some more rocks to it. So an essential part of managing burnout is having a routine that at the end of each day or at the end of each week or at the end of each project, you take those rocks out of your backpack and you take a rest. So what that might look like is, on your drive home from work, you say a little meditative prayer or whatever it is that you do to say, okay, I'm leaving work at work and I'm going to enter a new space where I'm going to focus on XYZ, whether it's your kids or your dog or your garden. And just having a practical approach to resolving those burdens that we're carrying so that we have short-term stress, not chronic stress. Another way of looking at that would be like just writing about it. I heard a story of someone who had a lot of burnout, and during the workday, she started writing her anxieties on a Post-it note and putting them in a jar, and she wouldn't look at them until Friday. And then every Friday, she'd take each of those Post-it notes out of the jar, look at them, and be like, actually, most of these have resolved themselves. And then she'd throw them away. And by the weekend, she was like, okay, I'm good. I've solved my problems.
Well, there was this recent viral moment on social media when Elmo from Sesame Street tweeted, Elmo is just checking in. How is everybody doing? And there were tons of responses with people writing, that they felt scared and depressed about losing family members and kind of negative or, perceived negative feelings. And it became this big talked about moment. Elmo even had to respond like, whoa, glad I checked in. Why do you think Elmo's tweet asking how people are doing resonated so strongly and ended up getting so much attention.
I think we all love having a safe place, a safe person to ask us, how are you? Are you okay? And in some ways, just talking about it and answering that question can be really healing. Now, what I wish for people is that they had that person in their life, like a real human being, because when you make eye contact with someone and you hug someone or you're in the same room with them, our nervous systems, our biology literally calms each other. But many of us spend more time with screens, myself included, than we do with our loved ones. And so to have, a soft, furry, safe person ask us, how are you doing? Really lets people kind of let it all out, doesn't it?
So even with all the resources available to people, why is mental health still such an issue? Therapist Emma McAdam will explain how increased awareness of mental health diagnoses may actually be part of the problem, especially when the information often found on social media may lack important context or solutions. We'll also talk about actions you can take to manage stress when current events trigger anxiety, or you're in a comparison rabbit hole. All that and more coming up next in our conversation. But first, a break for our sponsors. If there's one place to have high standards, it should be for your doctor. I believe we all deserve doctors who are both knowledgeable and who care, who listen to our questions and concerns and answer them with full transparency. If you need to look a bit more to find that kind of doctor, check out ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. You can filter specifically for ones who take your insurance, are located near you, and treat basically any condition you're searching for. And these docs all have verified reviews from actual real patients. So we're talking about booking appointments with tens of thousands of top-rated, patient-reviewed, credible doctors and specialists. I check ZocDoc whenever I'm looking for a new doctor, and I appreciate how easy it is to search and use. So go to ZocDoc.com/newsworthy and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. ZocDoc.com/newsworthy. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by Honeylove. Mother's Day may be over, but it's not too late to treat yourself with the essentials you actually want to wear. Ever since becoming a mom, comfort means even more to me. I need to be able to run around with my toddler, but I also still want to feel like my stylish adult self. Honeylove has revolutionized everything from leggings and tanks to shapewear and bras. For example, I basically live in Honeylove's Legging 2.0. The fabric is super soft and stretchy and breathable. The side pockets are the convenience that I need on a daily basis. And the shaping panels give me the support and look that I want. Honeylove is not just supporting women, it's empowering women. Treat yourself to the best bras, leggings, and more, and save 20% at honeylove.com/newsworthy. Again, use our exclusive link to get 20% off, honeylove.com/newsworthy, to find your perfect fit. And after you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and let them know we sent you. You deserve this. Free the pain and discomfort. Keep the support with Honeylove. Okay, now back to our conversation. And I know you also put out a video recently about how we need to stop comparing ourselves to others, which also is a thing that I think social media is connected to. Can you summarize some of the top takeaways from that video of yours?
Sure, yeah. I think comparing ourselves for others is something we do to try and gain a sense of how we're doing. We use comparison as a way to be like, oh, well, I'm working harder than so-and-so, so I must be okay. But then we look at someone else who works really hard and we're like, oh, they're such a hard worker, I must be bad. So comparison works a little bit in the short term, but in the long run, it's much more effective to create an internal measure of what we do want to be doing. So instead of having this ruler that we point at everyone else, we decide internally, what do I want my life to be like? What do I want myself to be like? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? And we create that internal strategy or that internal set of values.
And I imagine that also just removing yourself from the situation to compare all the time, similar to what we've already talked about, which is not looking at these things all the time, can also be helpful.
Absolutely. If you're just walking around at the store, at the mall, or wherever you go work, it's easy to have these automatic comparison thoughts pop up. But social media makes it forced. It forces you to compare. How many likes did this post get? How many followers does this person have? Oh, well, and we have to just be really intentional about how much time we're going to spend exposing ourselves to that.
Some people would argue that social media actually helps us connect more with people who maybe live far away or that we don't see, or that, we can connect with someone in the middle of the day when normally our friends aren't available because they're at their office job or whatever. So how much is it that versus, well, we're actually not seeing people in person as much?
I think you make a really good point. I am not one to say, all social media is terrible. I am one to say, we need to be incredibly intentional in how we use social media and tailor our feeds to counteract our scarcity mindset. So our brain has a natural bias towards negativity. If we're in a field with 100 watermelons and there's one mountain lion, what thing are we going to pay attention to? We're going to pay attention to the mountain lion because it's dangerous. So on social media, our brains are naturally inclined to see the things that are scary instead of to notice all the positive things. And so as we use social media, we just need to be really intentional to be like, I want to make sure and follow my friends. I want to make sure and unfollow these accounts that are really divisive. I want to make sure and include good news networks as part of my feed. And I want to make sure to include a variety of news sources as part of my feed so that I can be informed. But I want to make sure to only spend this amount of time or use social media during this time of the day. And I think in that way, social media can be a place to connect, but it's never going to soothe our nervous systems the way that face-to-face interactions do.
And of course, it's an election year. So these political divisions are really front and center. What do you think the impact of this kind of polarization that we're seeing in today's society is? And what are the best ways to deal with that?
This is tough. Can I just first say this is hard? This is hard because we don't want to bury our heads in a hole, but I also want to bury my head in a hole.
That's why our podcast exists. You just need 10 minutes a day and then don't look at anything else again.
Yeah. And if I were to say, what do we do about this? I would say, what if we thought about the news and each story that came up, we thought, is there something I can do about this? And if so, do I choose to do something about this? So we hear a story about political divisiveness. We're like, man, this feels so hopeless. There's nothing I can do about this. Why are so many people so bad? And we instead ask ourselves, what could I do about this? Okay, I could reach out to a neighbor who has a different political stance than I do. I could strike up a conversation with someone who has a Trump sign or a Biden sign in their yard. Or I could reach out to my congressperson. And we think about news from an action point of view.
And it's also maybe which story do I care enough about out of these, 10 stories in 10 minutes that you told me about? Which one do I actually care about to take action? And that is the one thing I want to do today. We don't all have to solve every problem, but we can all take a little bit of action, which I kind of like thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, and I think if we think about news as a chance to take action, then that anxiety response that comes up has a function, and we use that to motivate us to do one thing. And we also use that to kind of use news as informative and educational and productive instead of simply as entertainment.
One thing I want to ask is, as more people recognize mental health issues, research is showing that the number of Americans getting mental health care, including therapy, has grown over the past 20 years. And yet, the number of Americans who said their mental health is excellent has actually gone down. What do you think's going on there?
People are being exposed to more information than ever, saying oh, you might have ADHD, you might be neurodiverse, you might have mild autism, you might have high-functioning depression, you might have high-functioning anxiety. Where in the past, 30 years ago, the only people who were getting diagnoses were people who were not functioning. They could not do their work, or they could not manage their relationships, or they were unable to function in other ways. So now we're acknowledging that treatment and support and tailored interventions can be really helpful for people, and you don't have to wait until your life has exploded to get that support. So on the one hand, I feel like this is more inclusive and it's a positive thing. But on the downside, one thing that does happen is on TikTok and on Instagram and on YouTube, there's a ton of people out there, experts and non-experts, who are going to say, oh, if you have this, it means you have this disorder. And that when people hear the term a diagnosis, they think that this is some permanent character trait and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's kind of my mission on my channel, is to be look, we're describing a set of symptoms here. Now let's describe what you can do with it. Let's teach people. There's a gazillion things you can do, and let's just educate more so that people feel more hopeful about it instead of less hopeful.
Well, thank you so much to Emma McAdam for sharing her experiences and insights. Be sure to get even more accurate information and actionable advice from her through her YouTube channel called Therapy in a Nutshell. She also offers free resources and courses on her website, so we've linked to those in our episode notes on thenewsworthy.com. And of course, if you or someone you know is in urgent need of emotional support, call the Mental Health Crisis Line 988. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we mentioned in this conversation, our 10-minute news roundups each Monday through Friday aim to help you stay informed without so much anxiety and overwhelm about the news. So join us again on Monday to get all caught up and then get on with your day. Until then, have a great weekend.